listening in. Thank you very much for logging into this Zoom video conference meeting of the Licensing Committee. My name's John Turner. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague, Kate Sheldon, who is the host of the meeting. The meeting is a public meeting and will be live streamed for the public to view. Members are familiar with how we operate meetings now. If you can keep yourselves on mute, please, until you want to speak. Raise your hand, the chair will ask you to speak. Unmute yourself, mute yourself back after speaking. One final thing from me, for members of the public, you may see members and officers looking to the left and right of their screens. They're not being distracted in any way, they're simply looking at paperwork on other devices. I'll now hand you over to the chair of this meeting, Councillor Andy Bainbridge.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this extra meeting that we're having to consider the policy we weren't able to complete last time. Could I ask for apologies, please?
Yes, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillors Dorndale, Adam Hurst, Sinead Mayor Richards and Mick Rooney.
All right, thank you. I presume there are no exclusions of public or press?
No items, Chair.
No items, no. It's okay, Mary Claire, yeah. Right, anybody, any declarations of interest to declare? No. Right, so we then move on to we're looking again at when I can get to it.
Chair, do you want to do introductions?
The Licensing Act, licensing policy, sorry.
Do you want to do introductions, Chair, members?
Yes, perhaps we ought to do introductions. People appear in all sorts of places, so I'll just do them as they appear on my screen, okay? So the first one on the left-hand side is Joe.
Hi.
We got a hi and that was all, or was it just me?
Hi, Councillor Joe Otten, Dawn Totley. Did you hear that?
Yeah. We did, thank you, yes.
Okay.
Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Bauer. I'm from the Licensing Service.
Thank you. Vicky.
Good afternoon, Councillor Vicky Priestley, Stannington Ward.
Mary Claire.
Hi, Mary Claire Frankie, Solicitor to the Subcommittee.
Karen.
Councillor Karen McGowan, co-chair.
Jim.
Councillor Jim Stanky, Netherwich and Shower.
Cliff.
Councillor Cliff Woodcraft, Fullwood.
Douglas.
Councillor Douglas Johnson from City Ward.
Ruth.
Councillor Ruth Mercereau, also from City Ward.
And last but certainly not least, Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Bob Pullen, Beeshiff and Greenhill.
Thank you. Right, so everybody's introduced now. I ought to check, have you all received the minutes from the previous meeting? John emailed them out this morning, so has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yes,
Bob, did you put your hand up? You're muted, I can't hear you.
Sorry, Chair. No, it was a thumbs up. Receive the minutes.
It's thumbs up that you've got it, right, yeah. So the other way around, has anybody not received them? Right, Ruth?
Yeah, I've received them, but didn't have time to read them, I'm afraid. It was too late for me because I had other things this morning. So yes, I have received them, but I didn't have sufficient time to read them.
Right.
Chair, can I just a very brief explanation? I just thought it might help members in terms of, or remind them what was decided last time, what the outstanding issues were. That was the reason for sending them. So there's no need to read through them, Ruth, but I just thought a quick reminder.
Yeah, so when we get to the part that was in slight contention, then it might be worth you having a quick look through and seeing what was said if you're not able to remember. Right, in that case,
sorry, Andy.
Douglas, sorry.
Can I just check? So we're just having these for information. We're not formally endorsing or anything at this meeting. They'll come to a future licensing committee, will they?
That's correct, Councillor Johnston. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, it was just rushed in, just in case it might help anybody remember why we've got this extra meeting now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's helpful. It is useful to have. I mean, I'll just flag it up now then, because I would flag it up in the future and can maybe do an alteration to the draft there. I mean, I was just looking at the bit about areas of stress in the city, where in the statement it was believed that there were currently no areas of stress in the city. I mean, I just thought that should really reflect that was the officer's opinion at the time. It wasn't something that was agreed by the committee, and it certainly wouldn't be my view. I wouldn't want to be associated with that, because that's obviously quite a big issue. I don't know if John, you've got to either take it away for a further draft or whatever.
I'm happy to take that on board.
Welcome, Jose.
Yeah. I must stress they're not here for, but I'm happy to have discussions outside the meeting to amend as you've just said, Councillor Johnson, and we'll formally approve them at the next committee meeting. Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, just to support the point that Douglas has made, really, I think there is my understanding of the last meeting is that there was the clarity about what we meant by stressed, but there was an acknowledgement that a number of areas were likely to be, whatever we agreed on, were likely to be approaching that in the city. So I'd welcome a rewording, yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure when we get to that point in the report, Claire will address that. Did you manage to get the minutes, Josie, of the last meeting that John sent today?
Oh, no, I've not seen the one sent today. No.
Right, they were just sent to help us for the reasons why with another meeting today. So when we get to the parts that maybe we didn't totally agree on, that might be a time to just have a little look if you need to. But we're not going through them. We're not going to accept them as a true record. So okay. Just so that, but you should have them. Right. So can I go over to Claire then, please, to go through the revised policy?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all for coming back at such short notice today. I don't intend to read the entire report, if that's okay with you, Chair, because I originally went through it at the last meeting.
Claire, can I just stop a minute just to say that John's disappeared and we haven't got a note taker. I didn't know if you'd realised, Andy.
Right, I'll wait for him to come back. Thank you.
I knew someone had gone, but I hadn't realised.
Yeah,
yes,
I just realised it's John.
Yeah, so.
Actually recording the meeting, so John can take it from that if you want to continue. It's up to you.
Right, thank you, Kate. So we can continue then. Okay.
Sure, yep, fine, no problem. So yeah, the item was originally brought before you on the 5th of October. And at that hearing, members requested some further information as follows. So as you've seen from the minutes sent round this morning, number one was the issue regarding vaping be further referred to the Public Health Office for further comment, and two, the revised draft statement to include track changes which clearly highlight what revisions have been made. So I'll cover part one first, and I'll begin with explaining why I've set out the amendments as I have. You'll see that I've taken out any mention of smoking and vaping from page 20 of the policy, which is page 86 in your bundle, as this section refers to the public nuisance policy, and I didn't want the information to detract from the subject, which is ensuring that applicants are aware of their responsibilities to manage their outside areas and prevent them from being a source of nuisance. I've then added an additional section to page 45, which is page 111 of your bundle, which refers applicants to related legislation and guidance. And I do know that there's a typo on that page in the title. I've picked that up, so I've changed that in the main draft. So following the last meeting, I spoke at length with Sarah Hepworth from the Office of the Director of Public Health. And she said that there was, oh, let me just get my screen up. I've lost it. There, sorry. She said that there was, that evidence estimates that vaping is around 95% safer for users than smoking. So there was a bit of ambiguity around where we kind of wanted to sit the policy in relation to smoking. Now, I want to make it clear that this policy is about alcohol and it's about the Licensing Act, and smoking comes under a separate piece of legislation. But I do think it's right that we do refer to that and kind of give licensees and applicants a little bit of advice as to where we want them to set their policies. So you'll see that I've kind of given some information about smoking being the leading cause of illness and early death in Sheffield, and that there's legislation in place and what that legislation is. And then I've given some evidence from public health that states that vaping is significantly safer than smoking, and it doesn't show any harm to bystanders. There's no evidence found of that. However, it is known that e-cigarette vapor can be a nuisance and unpleasant for other customers in the area of people using those e-cigarettes, and they could cause symptoms of people that have asthma and other respiratory conditions. So I've kind of covered that by saying to licence holders that they're strongly advised to implement their own policy that takes into account professional etiquette and consideration to others who do not vape when determining where vaping will be allowed on their premises. And public health were happy with that change and those kind of words. Obviously that's up to you whether you think that we need to go strong with that, but at the end of the day, this is a policy regarding alcohol and not smoking. So we just need to be aware that the legislation's in place separately for smoking. And then part 2 of the requested further information, as I sent in my email, for the revised draft statement to include track changes. Unfortunately, the officer that drafted the report and the policy didn't keep a track change document throughout. So it's been really difficult for me to go right back and produce a track change document when so many changes have been made throughout a long period of time, and particularly with the IT issues that we've had over the past few weeks, it's just not been possible at all for me to do that. So I have given you a table of the main changes and where those changes have come from, and I hope it's sufficient for you to see what's happened throughout the process. Thank you, Chair.
He asked me to speak.
I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry about that. Right. So I'll open it up to questions. If people can put their hands up, then I'll write people's names down to ensure that I get you all in order. So Douglas.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thanks, Claire. Sorry, I had to nip out there. Some unwelcome intruder in the house. That's okay. So thanks for that. I think the important thing you said about the vaping stuff was that Public Health had endorsed the wording that you've put in there. If so, thanks very much. That is the sort of advice that this committee needs. So, I mean, others might have comments on that because others were more vocal than I was at the last meeting. On the issue about the track changes, though, I was going to say thank you for trying to get the track changes document. And appreciate you've not been involved with this all the way through. I'm just actually very concerned, though, that we've now got a document that is substantially different to our existing adopted policy. And actually, we don't know what all the changes are. We've been trying to guess what some of those are, but there's some that are what might look like minor wording, but probably aren't. There's quite a lot of stuff that's been deleted, it seems. And I think we're in a very difficult position to try and make a decision on changing the policy now without knowing precisely what that is. So there's a bit of thought to be had about how to proceed with this. And I think it is important to recognise it's not just about, you know, the sort of finer details of changing policy. It does have an impact on businesses in the city, because given that we've got an adopted policy, it's been entrenched in the licensing business for a number of years now, and it's reflected on things that's built up over time. So it's really important that we as a council don't change things arbitrarily, and that there is a danger that is what we're going to end up doing. So that's why I'm concerned about this. And I think if there are changes in there, then actually we need to be expressly aware of them and need to be, you know, expressly agreeing with them as a committee, not just assuming that they're right. So I'm just going to say that for now and see if anyone else has anything to say. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Douglas. Anybody else? Karen?
Just on what Douglas has just said, really, I haven't got concerns about the businesses because this has gone out to the public and a lot of people have commented and they have a vested interest in it. So I'm presuming they've read it because it's the businesses themselves that are going to have to adhere to it. So from that point of view, I feel like they've had an input into it. So I'm not too worried about that. I know, and so that's just about the whole process. I understand at this stage it's too hard to go back and have a look through, and I don't think there's the way around that really with the situation we've got. But on the part about vaping, I support what's being said. I know that there was members that had concerns, and I hope that addresses the concerns. I know Vicky, you were strongly, and I hope that this now addresses what your concerns were before.
Thank you, Karen. Ruth?
Yeah, I'd support what Douglas has said about this. I don't think there's enough information on the summary of changes that we've been presented with in the document. For example, let me just find the page. The summary of changes on page 125. For example, in paragraph 7, it says removal of specific areas in the city centre to allow an entire area to remain focused on the cultural hub. That doesn't give any information as what the specific areas in the city centre are that have been removed. Which are they? And what's the entire area that they're talking about, which is going to be focused on the cultural hub? This isn't enough information for us to make a decision on. So I'm supportive of what Douglas is saying, in that we need really specific information about what changes we're being asked to approve.
Sorry, what page was that, please?
That was 125 on the pack that we've been given.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you'd like to come back on some of those points, Claire.
I'm just trying to find the cultural hub reference on 125.
Paragraph.
Sorry,
7.
Councillor Masro. Pardon?
Paragraph 7 in the introduction.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's part of the introduction text rather than actually any wording of the policy. So I'll just have to find the previous policy and find out what it said. Just bear with me.
Have you got a page for the actual policy? My page 125 doesn't look like, I think the page.
It's in the bundle, Marie Claire, 125 in the bundle. So it's
the heading summary of changes made to the statement of licensing policy during consultation. In that,
yeah.
Yeah. While Claire's looking, did you want to say something, Ruth?
I've got you.
Yeah, just it would be really handy to have what the actual changes are that we're being asked to approve on, to approve or disapprove rather, because in the summary of changes, it's not really clear what they are. It's talking about paragraphs and sentences that have been changed or taken out, but I'm not aware what the differences are between this draft policy document and the previous one. So that would be really useful to have.
this not just saying that in the previous policy there was reference to specific areas in the city centre that were going to remain focused on cultural, to be a cultural hub, and now that isn't there in this policy?
Yeah, it was just part of the introduction kind of preamble. It wasn't part of the policy, it was just the introduction text.
But my point is that I'm not clear on what changes to the overall policy I'm being asked to approve or disapprove.
I'm really sorry, I can't get into Azure at the moment, so I'm having problems getting onto G Drive, so I'm having to find everything on the internet. The councillors should have all had a copy of the Licensing Act policy that we've been working from for the last 5 years. So that's just what I'm trying to find at the moment.
Can I just say that Azure's gone down? It's been taken down because they're doing some work on it, so you won't be able to get onto Azure, Claire.
No, I know, I'm trying to get it from the internet, but I'm struggling to find it because you can never find anything when you're under pressure, can you?
Can I make a suggestion? Because this is really unsatisfactory, but I'm also unhappy with pressure being put on Claire like this, because this isn't fair on her or me or anyone else. I mean, I'm just saying that we're in an unsatisfactory situation. It's not Claire's fault, she's being put on the spot. But there are some quite important things here. I mean, so, I think there's a reference actually to the area around Tudor Square and the Winter Gardens being the centre of the cultural hub. Why is that being taken out? And I think we probably need an explanation for that. But if Claire were able to find that, it would take this committee a long time to get through all of these things here so that we can actually have a fair discussion about what we're being asked to remove from the policy and what we're not. So, and that's before we go on to the big issues, like the one I mentioned before, which are areas of stress. And I'm going to ask the question, is it this council's view that it's fixed the issues of street drinking and begging in the city centre, and that's why there's a desire to remove the areas of stress? I think we've got a large debate in there. So I don't think we can deal with this today. So I'm simply going to suggest that we simply defer this again, or simply resolve that we don't approve this policy. In any case, it doesn't have to be passed by the licensing committee. It's up to cabinet, I think, and full council to make a decision on it. And so, whilst our view might be advisory, it's not critical. And simply that, if we can't be provided with, accurate and full and comprehensive advice on the policy decisions we're being asked to make, then I for one, am not prepared to make them.
Karen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to come in. I'm not too hung up about taking the areas out of the policy because when you read the old one, 5 years ago, there was areas of stress. So to me, and those areas of stress change all the time. So to have areas named in and then 5 years, and for a 5-year policy, it could be one area 1 year and it could be another area another year, and changing it like that, I just think it makes it out of date within a year or two. So I'm not too fussed, as long as it doesn't mean that those areas aren't important anymore. Every area is important, is what I'd say, but that's just my opinion.
That's Karen. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit confused at exactly what disagreeing about here. I mean, on page 107, there's a section on community of impact, and that talks about areas needing stress, but it doesn't name them. Is that right? That the objection is that the specific areas have come out, but there's still a description of the concept of areas nearing stress and the areas that might be considered for community of impact policies in due course. If that's the case, I'm reasonably happy with that. I have some sympathy for Councillor Johnson's point that we don't really know what changes we've been asked to make, and there may be something in there that we haven't seen and we regret later. So I have some sympathy with that point. I listen to what other members feel on it, but I don't know what practically the consequence of batting this down the road even further would be, whether that would cause other problems. I'll take advice on that from officers if they have it. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Douglas, I think you wanted to come back in.
Yes, I was only going to just respond to Karen's point of view. The point of view is that the areas of stress, I know it's because, of course, they do feature in my ward, so there's things that we have to deal with quite a lot in connection with residents and businesses there. The point is that actually they don't change, not significantly and not quickly. And those areas of stress have been listed in the policy for many years now. And there are questions about whether they should be expanded, whether there should be more robust treatment of them, and that's the discussion about cumulative impact assessment, which this committee has discussed a lot. But yeah, they don't chop and change just like that, and that is the reason, I think, for having them in. It's about recognition. So the effect of taking them out would be that actually the council has no formal recognition that anywhere in the city has more of an issue with drinking in licensed premises than any other area of the city, which, to anyone is just obviously nonsense. So I think it is important that the council does have a recognition there. So that's all. I just meant to clarify that from a sort of factual point of view.
If I just throw in a suggestion at this stage, could it be rectified by saying that the city centre remains an area of stress without identifying particular areas? Because I am concerned, as Joe says, that this is not a football that we just want to keep kicking into the long grass and kicking into the long grass. We very much really do need to have a policy. So I'm just wondering if perhaps it could be phrased somewhere that the city centre remains an area of stress, full stop, and that perhaps the city councillors could have a separate meeting with licensing to go through it, if that would help the situation. Josie?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. My suggestion was, because this is a policy, not the working document, is to say in the policy that there could be areas that will be decided upon outside or alongside this document. So this document allows for there to be areas of stress, but doesn't name the areas of stress, but the areas of stress can be as determined by the licensing committee. And therefore you've got your policy document, which you approve, and then we could arrange for a discussion and an agreement on areas of stress to be brought, which they would have to be brought to the licensing committee. Then that way you've got a document with them on, you've got an opportunity, which if you just put it in a policy document and leave it there, nothing particularly gets done about it. But if you have a separate document that comes to the licensing department, licensing committee, at least you're actually discussing them rather than just sticking them in a document and putting them on the shelf, which I think would make it more live and more meaningful than to just look at it once every 5 years. So you could have an annual piece of work that annually looks at and refreshes areas that are at or near in stress, because sometimes you can do work on an area near to being stressed rather than wait for an area to become stressed. So that's so you alter the document to say that there will be these areas will change, and I'll leave it to officers to find a succinct way of putting this, and they will be reviewed annually. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Jim?
So did you call me Chair? I didn't quite hear
No,
that.
no, I said Jim. Yeah. Sorry, Joe was next.
Thanks, Andy. I'd really like to back up what Josie's saying. I think that it needs to be kind of more dynamic than having something in the document. But at the same time, I suppose I appreciate what you're saying, Douglas, because I do think that there's areas of the city like the centre, which generally is going to continue as an area of that needs a cumulative impact assessment on a regular basis. But there's also kind of areas that come up very much out of nowhere, really. And I'd use the area in my own patch in terms of Nether Edge, in terms of the Abbeydale Road part of that, where you've got five drinking places that have come up literally within 100 yards, really very quickly. And it's how we kind of keep track of that. And I think what Josie's outlining in terms of a kind of almost an annual report in terms of those areas of stress would be actually helpful. But meanwhile, to kind of recognise it in the document that there are kind of more permanent areas, and then there's kind of more transitionary areas possibly that could take account of that. So that, I suppose, I think seems a common sense way forward.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with what Councillor
yeah.
Pashek and Councillor Steinke said. I'm still a little unclear about how this policy works as a policy, because we have areas nearing stress, and then we have community of impact areas that we don't actually have any, but you know, that would be the next step. And again, this is still on page 107. This policy also says, even if you don't have a community of impact policy, you can still make objections on community of impact grounds. So I'm not really very clear, you know, what the difference between that is and therefore having a community of impact policy is. So we have three, three classes of area, and one of them that we don't actually have any of is called community of impact, but that is not the only place that community of impact might be considered. That seems terribly unclear. So if it's not clear what effect in policy an area nearing stress has, then I certainly wouldn't want to start writing into the policy what those areas are. I would rather have, I appreciate we all think we recognise areas nearing stress and areas that we might consider community of impact policies for, and therefore they're good concepts to have in the policy. But to write them in, no, I think it absolutely is, as Councillor Pashek said, we need to keep an eye on areas nearing stress, and therefore we need to actually put those areas somewhere else that in a more living document that gets more attention. But I mean, I don't know if the wording, the policy can be clarified, or maybe it's just my misunderstanding and the wording is fine. But I wouldn't, I think we're in danger of spending too long on something that doesn't actually have a difference in terms of what licenses might be accepted or rejected. I'm not, I suppose what I'm getting at is I'm not clear from the policy whether putting something in an area nearing stress actually makes a material difference to any application. And if it doesn't, then we particularly don't want to be going down the road of writing these these areas into the policy, because we're writing even more detail in there that doesn't actually add value to the policy. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I come to Ruth, could I just say that cognizant of what a lot of people have said, these will come before the licensing committee, and obviously if it is an area of stress, that will be expressed to us. So does it necessarily need to be in the policy? Because we will automatically take it into consideration, because the police, licensing enforcement and so on will all be making us aware of those things anyway. So I think that's something else to bear in mind, but we'll carry on. Ruth was next.
Yeah, following on from what both Joe and Andy said, areas of stress is only one issue though. The main issue I have with this is that we still don't clearly know what the significant changes are to the policy since the last draft. For example, what actions could be taken for persistent offenders who sell to underage children? We don't know what the changes are from the last draft. So I'm not clear on what the significant changes are to the new policy compared to the old policy, and that's what I'd like to have before I vote on any changes. Thank you.
And Douglas?
Well, I was also going to say, yeah, we're not just talking about areas under stress. I mean, that's just something that's a really glaring issue. I mean, I think, as Councillor Otten said, you perhaps don't need to write something in. But actually, no, the proposal here is to take something that's an existing policy and remove it. And if we're going to do that, then I want to have a good reason for that. And just cross-checking about what we've been told as a committee by the licensing service, the reason is, it says, wording amended to reflect current position. Well, whose position? We haven't had this debate before. It's not our agreed position. Might be the sort of head of licensing personal position, which, because he's made his personal views very clear on many occasions. But to suggest otherwise is completely nonsense. And I feel that we're being misled by just taking this. But we were raising this just because this is one issue. There's 100 and odd pages that we'd have to go through debating potentially line by line to work out what the implications are. And it's clear from everyone's contributions, we've all got you know, possibly differing views, but we're still quite confused. I think confused was the word that Councillor Rotten used, and it's quite right. And I think this is a really unsatisfactory position to be in for any sort of decision making.
Thank you. Claire, would you like to come back on any of that?
Well, I don't think it's the head of licensing's personal position. I'm not quite sure why that word was used again. It's not my document. It's something that was drafted by somebody else, and I've added to it to try and make it clearer. So if I haven't picked that bit up. I certainly agree with what Councillor Pashek said about this is more of a living document that needs to be kind of run alongside the policy. I think, as Councillor McGowan said, the information goes out of date quite quickly, and I think that was the officer's point of view. Pretty much every single area of stress in the policy that was there 5 years ago, probably bar one, has now gone and has been gone for a long time. So we felt that it perhaps wasn't very much value of it being in the policy and being published and kept there. But I do agree with Councillor Pashek, like I say, that this is a living thing and that it could be run alongside. And as we get to areas nearing stress, we can look as officers and a committee at the evidence that we have of these areas and see whether there's any further work that we need to do to take them into cumulative impact. So, Councillor Ashton, your comments were that it wasn't clear that where the distinction came. Yeah, I think some wording can be added to give distinction about an area nearing stress is something that we've come up with as an office, and that was agreed last time the policy was published by the committee. I think it gave an idea that this was somewhere that was on our radar. We were concerned about it, but we weren't yet concerned to the level that we had to do the research into it becoming in a cumulative impact area. So that's the distinction. So yeah, I think that could be clarified a little bit. And then if we come to any situations where an area nearing stress or an area is so stressed that we think it needs to be a cumulative impact policy, we do that information and research and evidence taking and decide to make it a cumulative impact area, then that can be published as a kind of addendum to the policy. So that's the way I kind of see it working, and I think Councillor Pashek put it in a really succinct way of how it could work.
Thank you, Claire. I think we seem to be having two issues here, because we've got one which is the areas of stress, and I'm sure they will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think perhaps the people who are not happy about this may go along with what Councillor Pashek says, that we have a yearly meeting to look at those areas of stress to make sure that we have the right areas in there, and add areas that are coming in, etc., that it's a continuous thing. Whereas, as been pointed out, this is for 5 years. I don't think we should just say, oh, these are the areas of stress, and then forget about them for 5 years. It needs to be an ongoing thing. So if I could just check first, with the people who have concerns about that, would you be happy with us having a separate policy document which looks at the areas of stress and put that area then to one side? Douglas?
In short, no. I mean, the point is we're using this as an example to show that we're basically not being given, a full picture of the changes that are proposed here. This is just one example. So I think we've shown that the proposal, the reasoning we've been given for this is that the wording's been amended to reflect current position. Doesn't tell us what wording has been changed, and it doesn't say that it reflects the current position. That's just in one line of 5 words there. It's going to take us a long time to work through every element of this proposal. it's really important that we're not misled by officers in this situation, and that we're clear about what we're being asked to decide. Because there are other issues in there, and I just think about the implications for the licensing service acting in relation to licenses where there's been flouting of coronavirus-related issues, because there's things in there that have been taken out that will be relevant.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I was hoping we could have just at least get one item out of the way, but obviously not. Marie-Claire?
I just want to stress that this isn't officers misleading anybody.
No.
What, in the original document, the areas nearing stress were detailed, so they were named. So, for example, it was, well, Claire, can you remember what the exact ones were?
Yeah, it was West Street and Division Street, West Street, Devonshire Street and Division Street. So the first one, sorry, was for late night alcohol. The second one was for street drinking. Then there was Broomhill to do with takeaways, which is no longer an issue, and Eccles Road, which was liquor licence premises and outside drinking.
Thank you. What we were saying was in policy number, the old policy, if you like, these places were named. We had a discussion with chairs and your cabinet member, and we said that it basically becomes out of date, because what areas that we would consider nearing stress at the moment are, for example, Kelham Island, which isn't on that list. And 5 years ago, no one could have dreamed that Kelham Island would have become an area nearing stress. So in 5 years' time, what's going to be the next Kelham Island, if you like, because nobody knows who it might be. Abbeydale Road, as Councillor Stanky says. So
sorry, what where is this referred to in the report?
Well, you've just said that. Sorry, give me the page number where you said that areas nearing stress. So in terms of the changes, where it says reflected, it's been amended to reflect the current position. The old document detailed the names of places. The current position is that actually it's best to be more open and flexible. So we're giving you the answer to what you were saying. Nobody's misleading anybody. We're just saying that actually currently we don't have issues with the places 5 years ago that were nearing stress. We have new areas that we have concerns with that we believe now are nearing stress, but rather than writing them down and making them possibly out of date in a year, we keep it open, we keep it more flexible, and we keep a rolling note, if you like, on these areas. So I just want to make it clear that officers aren't misleading you. There is no there's nothing to be misled about here.
So sorry, the point is, that might be a legitimate conversation, and there might be some merit in some of those proposals, and obviously there's quite a lot of thought that's gone into it. But when has this committee been briefed of those discussions and the implications of them before what you've just said now? I mean, had what you said just now been put into the report so that we could have thought about that and taken some soundings from other people, that would have been a helpful way to address this situation. But it's not been. We haven't had any information about that. And that's the concern.
Okay, so it's not in the level of detail that you would want.
It's not in any detail, Marie-Claire.
Well, it just says it's been amended to reflect the current position, and officers are then in a position, as Claire did, to detail what that current position is and what that means.
Sorry, I don't want to sound too critical of officers who are here and present, because it's not just on people here. It's about the whole setup of the office arrangements that we have and backdoor discussions with cabinet members and so on. And it's not a good way of making a policy work, is it? It means that we have something brought here and we just get this one-line thing which addresses a serious issue, but masks it by pretending it's, well, not acknowledging what the issue is. And it's kind of frustrating, because when I hear Claire and Marie-Claire describe the issues quite eloquently and getting to the point, that is what we need to know. But it's not just that we need to know them in a casual Zoom conversation now. They need to be in a proper report. They need to be publicly available at least 7 days in advance. And we need to be able to get some reactions from those, because that's how democracy works. I mean, if people aren't prepared to, stick by democratic principles, then fine, just vote it through. But I'm just saying that, I'm really not happy with the approach this has come about. So that's why I'm really not supporting this present policy.
Joe?
Thank you. Can I mean, make a technical point? I don't know, it's possibly maybe helpful or maybe unhelpful, but there's a feature in Word to combine revisions from multiple authors. If you go into review and there's a compare button, if you click that, one of the options is combine. That will generate a new master document, as I understand it, that includes that will recreate the track changes between two versions of a document. It may not work if the changes have been too great and it can't find its place and whatnot, but I don't know if that's been tried and if that could be tried. I mean, in theory, I could try it with the PDFs that have been sent, but I think it probably has a better chance of working with the original Word documents.
That's correct. Thank you. Chelsea?
Can I just say, as a former chair of this committee, I think some of the comments have been deliberately difficult. Can I just say that when you're looking at a policy document of this size, there is no way that you can sit 20 some people, because there are 15 people that are actually members of this committee. There are licensing department people, there are legal advising people, and there are other people that are involved in all these processes. There's no way that you could go through a document of this size in a committee basis, line by line, and agree it without taking the entire year up, give or take any cases that may or may not come in. When people meet outside the meeting, and you know, I don't know what committee and what experience have you got, but I do know that there are other people from other parties sat in this that have chaired other committees over the years, and every major committee will have chairs and vice chairs that will meet with officers to try and get things to a point where only pertinent points are discussed in a committee. And that isn't anything to do with democracy. It's about trying to make the meetings as productive and as meaningful as possible. And I think it's quite insulting to staff and everybody that puts in all those extra hours to infer that there's anything other. And some of those meetings, and I've been involved with them both on this and in audit, and they are cross-party usually. The chair is from one party and the vice chair is from another. And the last one I was on was audit, and this one, and audit, you will normally have a Labour chair and a Lib Dem vice chair on that, and you go and you have the discussion and you do it in good faith and with the best interests of trying to get a productive meeting. And what they're trying to do here isn't bypass democracy, it's about trying to make a productive meeting. And you know, and that's what we try to do on this committee. We try to make the outcomes productive and workable for future committees that have to sit on cases. And I think you've got a point in that whether the names are in or out, and I think the names should be out. And as a way of improvement, the reason I said a list should come, and you know, you can pick your frequency, it can be annually, it can be biannually, it can be whatever you want it to be. The fact is, while you're doing this as a policy document, you're not actually having a discussion on the names that are listed. So you want the document as a policy document, which this is a policy document that says that there will be these areas, that they will need to be discussed and they will need to have decisions made on them. But you then make that live and you make it meaningful by having them discussed more often than once every 5 years. So even if you got an annual meeting, you're discussing it 5 times more than you would have done in a previous document. And I think I welcome Joe's, Councillor Otten's, attempt to be pragmatic on this. And if we can go back and you can have a track document, absolutely brilliant. But we need to be absolutely clear why those meetings take place and what actually is discussed there and what they're trying to achieve. And I think we just need to have that logged. So I hear what people are saying. I understand that you want those areas listed somewhere. I understand that there is a reason to discuss them. And I accept actually that there's a reason to discuss them more than every 5 years. And I think we just need to move on from that. Whether you have other items, even if you just sign off that one issue, at least you can then move on and ask for all the other stuff that you want. But I don't think that you cannot agree that as a way forward, because it's better than anything you've ever had before. But I'll put that out to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joseph. Before I come to Councillor Mercereau, if I could just say that my first consideration as a member of the licensing committee is, am I happy that I understand what I am judging when a case comes before me of whether somebody should be granted a license or whether their license should be removed. And I do think we're getting a little bit bogged down with some people in semantics here, because I don't feel that it's necessary for us to go through this document line by line and each individual one. Maybe I just feel that I've been on licensing long enough now to feel I have a grasp of whether or not we're going to grant a license or not. At the end of the day, as Claire said, this is to do with alcohol anyway. It's not really to do with everything else. And we're all ward councillors. We all know where there are the stresses and strains in each of our wards. And this document is not meant to be a panacea, a cure-all. It's just a general document there for us to be able to refer to. And yes, it would be a good idea that we have separate meetings, probably once a year or something like that, as Josie has suggested, where we look at things in a more detailed way in certain areas to keep our fingers mostly on it. But we need to have a general policy, and this is all that it is. And I have to agree that you know, we don't want to get bogged down with some of these issues, which quite frankly, I don't feel we need to have fully in our minds when we consider the individual licensing committees that we attend, whether someone deserves a license or deserves to keep a license. And if we just keep kicking this down the long grass, going on and on with it, we're not going to have a policy. We're going to have something that's 5 years out of date, and we really do need to make some decisions quite soon. I can see Councillor Mercereau is itching to get in, so I will step back and allow you to come in at this point.
Hello, thank you. Just to request then, just a summary of the significant changes to the policy that have been made since the last draft. That would be a really helpful addition to the document. That's all from me.
That seems quite fair, Claire.
That's what's been attached to the bundle. I'm not sure, beyond going back and doing the whole document again with track changes, I'm not sure what additional I can add. The best thing to do would be to compare it to the document that was published in 2016 and look at the change in the words.
But are there significant changes to particular policies in the new document that we need to be aware of? That's what I'm trying to find out.
No.
So, for example, at the last meeting, there was a discussion about actions that would be taken against persistent offenders who sold to underage drinkers. And I think we did ask for some changes there, if I remember rightly.
No, that was regarding the Gambling Act test purchase strategy.
Right.
That was the item before this.
Right. So would there be something in the summary that would indicate that we've made a request to change that particular policy?
No, because it was under a different piece of legislation.
Right.
This is the Licensing Act. The item
Right.
that you're referring to is the Gambling Act,
Gambling.
and that was the item prior to this one.
I see.
The last
Okay,
meeting.
thank you. Right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I'm just checking
strategy in this that hasn't changed.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's page 90, I think it is. It does itemize what should be done with things like child exploitation. These things are in here. They might not necessarily say this is a change from last time, but it does state exactly what each area is. There's the test purchases, and I'm happy to see you've put the word must in second failure, which wasn't there before. So thank you for that, Claire. And also, third failure after 12 months, a review application may be submitted after considering the past history of the premises and the management. So you have listened to us there, and that has been put in. So, you know, things that we said have been included in that. So I think at this stage, we don't seem to be able to resolve the differences that perhaps that some of the members have. I feel, as you say, Claire, there is a summary of the points that we need to know. I'm not particularly worried whether they are different or not from the previous policy. They are there. This is what we should be looking at. So I'm quite happy with that. It just, to me, seems to be playing around with semantics, playing with words, wanting to know which word's different and what isn't. What we need to look at now is there in this policy, and that's personally all that's asked for. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, I mean, I have some sympathy with both sides of this. You know, there's nothing in the policy that's leapt out of me as being wrong, and on that basis, it seems a reasonable thing. But I would be more assured if I could see the track changes document. So I did ask 2 questions earlier, and nobody's answered either of them. So if I could have answers to those, that would help. So the first one was, what would be the consequences of batting this back again procedurally? Would that cause problems? The second one is has it been attempted to recreate the track changes using the compare documents function in Word, and if not, can that be attempted, please? Can I have, you know, can anybody possibly answer those 2 questions?
So if I'm not to Claire, Marie-Claire or Claire, if you're able to answer that for Councillor Orton.
Marie-Claire, can you cover the consequences?
Yes, we're currently without legally the policy's got to be reviewed every 5 years, and we're outside of that time frame now. So decisions that you make under the Licensing Act are potentially challengeable under the fact that we've got no policy. Wider consequences, I'd have to have a think about, but potentially it's just the basis of the decisions that you're making on Licensing Act cases.
Thank you.
The policy is due to go to Cabinet next month to be approved. So again, the policy goes out of date in January, so it's still in time. But to get it published for January, obviously it has to be approved by Cabinet in November and then full council in December in order for that to legally get passed in January. And the query about the track changes, no, I haven't tried to do that, mainly because I haven't had access to Azure since the last meeting nearly. So the changes, you might be right, I might be able to do that, but unless I have access to the original version and a working system that doesn't take 3 weeks of your life to load, then yeah, it could be worth a try. To actually try and do it now here, I couldn't do it because I can't access Azure.
No, I wouldn't suggest trying to do it now. No, it's a process. I mean, I have used it on something else, and it took a little bit of work. On that basis, I've got to say I'm leaning towards the view that I would be inclined to let this go through now, but I would request that we get the track changes that way if possible, and that therefore there's an opportunity for either Cabinet or full council to put amendments if something is found in documents that we might on reflection not wish to have. That would be my view. I think I'm going to still listen to other members, but I think at that point I'd be inclined to let it go through, if that can be attempted. And actually, I mean, I'm quite happy if you just send the current and the proposed policies to me as Word documents, and I'll try and do it if you want to do that, because you know my council IT is working at the moment, so that might be easier.
Okay, that's That's really kind. Once I can access it, if I can't do it myself, then I'll definitely get in touch with you. Thank you for the offer.
Okay.
Thank you. Douglas?
Yeah, thanks. Well, that sounds like progress there to get some of the technical side done. I don't know why councillors have got working IT, and yeah, lots of people across the council have been struggling because it's obviously, I guess it's because we don't use Azure. So anyway, going on Councillor Orton's point, I mean, I think there is a danger about us approving a policy now without knowing exactly what it says, but presumably the implications, and I suppose I want to check with Mary Claire what your advice is, formally it has to be signed off by full council. So in reality, it has to go to Cabinet first, but there's not a requirement for licensing committee to endorse it or otherwise. So it doesn't actually matter whether we today approve, reject, or express no view on the policy. It will still go through Cabinet and full council anyway, and it'll be those bodies that make the decision. Is that right? So we don't need to commit ourselves to something which obviously does need further work on it. Is that right, Mary Claire? Yeah.
Yeah, from what I understand, I'm going to put my hands up and say governance isn't my favourite thing. So in terms of the actual internal procedure, I know that this is a full council decision. I think what would usually happen is that it would go to full council, say it, bearing in mind you're the ones who've sat at full council, not me, and say the licensing committee agree this policy, and then I imagine your colleagues and peers would put a greater weight on that, with you being the experts in this area and the people with the knowledge of it. But yeah, ultimately it is a decision for full council rather than yourselves.
Thanks, Mary Claire. So in terms of the government's meeting, presumably this will come in effect as a motion to full council, and yeah, regardless of the views of this committee or cabinet, even it'd be up to full council who can make a proposal or an amendment to that proposal on the day, and that is what the decision would be. So I guess it does reinforce the point of view that we don't need to commit ourselves to a decision today. So I wonder if we could now get this some rectification done in the sense that Councillor Otten and Claire have suggested, so that we're in a position at least to know whether either there's changes that we're happy to approve in a broad sense, or whether there are other things there that perhaps want a bit more consideration. So I'm going to propose that we effectively defer this again, so make no decision today on approving or otherwise this policy. I don't know if Councillor Otten has any, I don't know if that chimes with what you were saying at all.
Well,
it's partly a practical way around.
Not entirely, Councillor Johnson. I reflect now that though I said obviously this could be amended at Cabinet or at full council, presumably we can't, neither of those bodies could simply add things that they wanted, that there has to be there's been a consultation process on this proposal, and that has to be respected, and you can't put in things that haven't been consulted on. So I don't know exactly what scope there is for amendment at a later stage. I'll take advice on that. I hear what you're saying, that it's not necessarily for the licensing committee to approve this in order for cabinet to approve it. It would be surprising though, wouldn't it? I'm not sure what the advantage either of rejecting it. I mean, you did say we shouldn't approve this when we have no idea what it actually says, but actually that's the opposite of the case. We do know exactly what it says because and we have seen it, and I haven't seen anything that concerns me particularly. We're just concerned that there may be something missing, I suppose, that was in the previous policy and has been quietly left out. Now, again, I don't know how, if we've consulted on this document, whether it would be in order for us to put bits of the old policy back in without going out to consultation again. I'll take advice on that. I'm sorry I'm not being more helpful.
So just two simple responses to that. I mean, presumably at full council, in the way that we have motions and amendments, we can do that. You don't need to formally consult on that. But also in the document before us, we've got some elements at least that haven't been consulted on. So for instance, the vaping proposal that's changed between the meeting earlier this month and now, that's not gone to public consultation at all. I'm not objecting to that, but I'm just flagging that up as a demonstration that not every word is consulted on.
Josie?
I have concerns about this because the licensing committee, yes, it sends documents to cabinet and council, but they've always been passed on the recommendation of the licensing committee, because this committee is classed, whenever we make decisions, as being quasi-judicial and it's been cross-party, and we're on that committee not as members of a particular political party, but we are on this committee. As with this committee and the planning committee are the two committees that aren't answerable to and should never be answerable to party politics. We're on there as individuals making decisions that are what we believe to be in the best. All decisions should be in the best interest of the citizens of Sheffield, but these particular two committees are separate. They are statutory bodies in their own right. If we're sending something to cabinet and if we're sending something to full council, we are setting a very dangerous precedent when we're saying that as a licensing committee we think this, but the council could overrule it, because we're the committee that are answerable to the decisions that we make. And I think we need to, I think it's a very dangerous precedent to be going away from being the committee that makes those decisions and putting them in the political arena. Those policies should be going to the council committees. They should be proposed and seconded across the party and are usually just taken through on what we say. Now, if we want to do this and do a review of it, so for those amendments, so that you can take it through, so that we've got a policy that we could very quickly look. And it's not just, I think you have to be careful about whether we're tracking the changes of typing errors and various other things, or whether we're actually changing, if those decisions have actually any impact on the decision that you're actually making and have any particular impact on the meaning of the contract, because the policy, because that is different. So I think if we're sending something to cabinet or full council, we have a responsibility as a committee to be recommending that. I think we're abdicating our responsibility if we don't.
Claire, you wish to say something?
Yeah, this document is a document that's been with this committee for 5 years. It's used numerous times a week, usually, for applications. The policy sections haven't been updated that much. If anything, it's just some tweaks to the legislation. And I think that document kind of, the change document highlights where those changes have been made and the reasons for doing so. We sent out over 5,000 letters of consultation, and we only got kind of 31 comments back. It kind of demonstrates that the document's working, it's in place, only tweaks have been made. The last hearing, the arguments were kind of around vaping and areas nearing stress, which are both not areas of policy. They fall outside policy. They're more kind of informative sections. And the vaping, again, has gone further into the informative section. It was in a policy section and it's been removed and put so that licensees know where that falls. So when members are making decisions on applications, if they're happy with what's in the text and it's up to date with the legislation, there's nothing in there to mislead. Officers aren't misleading. We're trying to keep things as up to date as possible, and we're trying to keep the city as safe as possible under this piece of legislation. I can't stress enough that there aren't that many changes in this document, and from using it week in, week out, it should be fairly clear to see that.
Thank you. I'm very mindful that we need to draw this to a close, and I don't wish sound personally in this way, but it very much seems to have been councillors Johnson and Otten putting their views in this meeting, but it is a meeting for everybody. That's not meant as a criticism, Councillor Johnson. I'm just saying that's the way it's worked out.
No, that's fine.
I am prepared to take and to you as well, Councillor Otten. It's not meant as an insult to you. It's just the way that it's worked out today. So mindful of that, Councillor Johnson has put forward a motion to delay our acceptance again. Would you like to say what your wording is, Councillor Johnson?
I think I was proposing to not approve the policy, so not to approve or disapprove it, not to make a decision on approving it. In other words, and maybe there's a better way of putting it, but I think not to endorse the policy in its current form.
Right. So you weren't asking for a delay until you get more information. You just didn't want to.
Well, no, I mean, I would in other circumstances, but I don't think it's helpful. I think that given the timescales, we need to get a policy sorted out. In reality, if we do this, it can just go to cabinet. Cabinet can, make a decision on whether they want to endorse it in its current way or otherwise, and it can go ahead then. I mean, so it will get dealt with. Whereas if we ask for another delay, it's kind of it doesn't fit in with the timescales. It just makes it harder for everyone. And I don't want to make it harder just for the sake of making it harder. I want it to be right.
That's okay, thank you. Right, so I'm glad I went back to you because I misunderstood what you were putting forward.
Yeah,
right. So what we're voting on is that we do not accept this policy today. That is basically what you were saying, isn't it, Councillor?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So all those people, put up your hands if you are in favour of not accepting this policy as laid out before us today.
Me then. Yeah. Okay.
That quite plainly is to all those who would like to accept the policy today. Does that mean we have? Thank you. Does that mean we have one abstention?
It does, Chairman.
It does, right. But I think that motion has been clearly defeated. Was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I got 7
to 2. You got 7 to 2. So I think at the end of the discussion today, we have formally accepted the report today and recommend it to Cabinet. Councillor McGowan, I'm used to calling everybody by first names.
Yeah, no, that's fine by me. I just want to say I think this has been really difficult and we're working in really difficult times. I'm sure you were going to say something but I think staff have done absolutely amazing. They're working with systems that they can't get onto. We've got staff off and they're picking up work from other staff. This is outside the norm, and I think they've done an amazing job. And I just want to say thank you to them. None of this is against you, Claire, and your team, because I think it's come across that you've been doing things underhanded, or there's been an insinuation that staff are working underhanded or something. And I know that's not the case. I've read this document and nothing stood out to me. Like Joe said, there was nothing that made me think, oh wow, what's happening here? This looks wrong. I read the document. I don't want to read 500 track changes from different people when some of it, like you've said, will be just typing errors and things like that and trying to work all that out. I read the document as it stands now and in fact it's sent fine to me. So I think we've done what we needed to do about the vaping and other issues, and yeah, just thank you to your team. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo that thanks, Claire, for you in particular, because you've had to take this up at the last moment. I have to say that it wasn't discussed and I didn't feel it was necessary. I'm not over happy with what the decision was with the vaping on a purely personal level. I find it just as antisocial as smoking, but I'm prepared to go with this is what the health people say, but I know I will not be going into any premises that allows vaping on the premises, particularly at the moment when alcohol can only be served when there's food. I don't want people vaping around me when there is when I'm eating, and I know a lot of people will feel the same, but I'm not aware that it's a problem. It was brought up as a problem last time, but I can't recall going into any pub anywhere where anyone has been vaping, so it doesn't appear to be a problem to me, so I'm quite happy for it to go through. John, was it something specific you wanted to say?
Yeah, just to complete the formalities, I think we've had a proposal from Councillor Johnson. I think we need a formal proposal from one of the 7 in favour of endorsing, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an assumption that will be the decision, but I think we need to vote on the a proposal to endorse, which I assume is the.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
negative, not enough, Josie.
I'm happy to do that if you don't want it to be a chair to do it.
I think it's probably best if not. Can we have a seconder as well, anyone? Jim, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Right, so in that case, sorry, I did just take it that it was the opposite. I accept what you say, John. So all those in favour of accepting the document today.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Councillor Pullen abstaining again. Oh, sorry, against.
Yeah, those against.
Against, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. 2 against and Councillor Pullen abstaining. Yes, you're abstaining, Councillor Pullen. Yeah, I think that's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Right, in that case then, that's, oh, sorry, you had a point, didn't you, Councillor Pullen? I do apologise. You need to unmute.
My abstention today, Chair and colleagues, is a result of the utter mental confusion that I find myself in the purpose of some of our discussions today. I totally agree with what Councillor Paszek underlined, that as what is commonly known as a quasi-legal committee, before we recommend anything as serious as a policy document, we need to be absolutely sure that that document has clarity. We often hear in these discussions, it's pure semantics, it's pure this, it's underhand. I don't see any of those things whatsoever. I see a document to which 3 basic sectors of our community has access to and relies upon to know what is the likely decision in the first instance of the licensing committee, should I make an application for serious investment in a new business. Secondly, it's a document which those who are already operating businesses may wish to have recourse to say, am I keeping my original pledge? Am I meeting my original terms and conditions for correct operation in the eyes of the council and the licensees? And thirdly, it's a document to which people wishing to examine an application to see how it might impinge on their way of life can see whether the council has acted in keeping with its quasi-legal function in recommending or refusing an application with a view to a revocation, should it not have kept to its policy. I find the present document confusing beyond belief. I could do at least half an hour on this one, where the areas of confusion are and why they are confusing. But looking at it from the perspective of those 3 identified categories of the public, I'd like to ask 2 questions. And the one is, ought there to be some kind of a glossary of the terminology used in this document which will help all and sundry, not those regularly involved in trying to implement it as a decision-making tool, but for the basic understanding of the public. What we talked about today, cumulative impact studies. Is there not a cumulative impact study done in reality before each and every application is brought to committee for an application for new license? You can only do such an impact study if the policy document stipulates the criteria upon which that decision is made. If the cumulative impact policy is not reflected in the policy document and say that there will be within a given area, as defined by reference to a map or a definition in this policy of there will be no more than a stipulated number of alcohol outlet premises in a given area, what is the value of it? The policy has to define the criteria on which its decisions are being taken clearly for the benefit of the public. Areas of concern, areas of reaching stress. What are the criteria? And when are those criteria applied for determining when a particular area of the city is reaching the concern or stress? Is it numerical? Is it based on number of observations by the public? Is it based on number of complaints? Is it based on the number of incidents reported to the police or people, enforcement officers in other areas? What are the basic criteria and when do we decide it? A good policy document should lay out the criteria that define an area of stress, and it should be predictive. It should be preventative. By applying this clear policy document, we will prevent areas of stress or have a good early warning system which enables the enforcement officers and the legal officers to prevent it. The final point, even in such a simple matter as Marie-Claire Frank is our outstanding legal advisor. What is a city centre? Where is a city centre? The city centre for the understanding of the legal implementation of this policy document is like shifting sand, and that's quite right. A city evolves, the areas change. Kelham Island was going through my mind repeatedly in the early parts of today's discussion. The place I referred to in the last meeting, Councillor Steinke's area, even as we were speaking, the number of licensed alcohol outlets in that particular part of the city, from the Broadfield pub down London Road towards the city centre, increased from 6 to 7, even as we sat and discussed it. The reaction to that comment of mine in the Star, the article, brought some very interesting reactions from members of the public who asked the very questions that I'm putting before us now. What is a cumulative impact? Have there been a lot of complaints? There haven't, therefore why would you want to refuse or revoke a license application in that area? It doesn't matter if there are 50 in that area. But in thinking about these considerations, we're losing the sight of the fact that we are the controllers, we are the decision takers on this and the planning committee as to what the future shape of this city for the coming generations will be. And we should be asking the question, do we want 10, 20, 30, 50 licensed alcohol retail premises within a given stretch of major highway, exposing our next generations to these influences? So my two questions are, ought there to be some kind of a glossary of the major terminology in this policy document? And then relating to areas, ought there to perhaps be what we used to have in days gone by for licensing committees, an actual map of the areas of the type that formerly existed for preventing disputes in the area which was known as the night entertainment industry area, which radiated out from Carver Street, when we used to be meeting regular conflicts of interest between local residents and late night licensing activities and music entertainment in that particular area. But there was a clear understanding that within a given area around that section of the city of the centre, nightlife entertainment was a primary and preferential activity. So if you bought a flat in that area or you became a resident there, you had advanced knowledge from the licensing policy committee's documentation that their precedence was given to the nightlife activities. The two questions: glossary, map indications of particular areas. Thank you very much.
Oh, do you wish to, are you in a position to answer any of those questions, Claire or Marie-Claire?
The glossary is at page 118 of your bundle, which is page 52 of the policy document. And the city centre map is at page 77 of the bundle, which is page 11 of the policy document.
Thank you, Claire. I'll look it all up afterwards. I didn't expect an answer now. They were basically just hypothetical questions for consideration, if it would be helpful.
Yeah, they're there.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I had seen them. And I have to echo some of my fellow colleagues. I do not understand the confusion of a lot of people. The policy, which is why I was prepared to vote for it, seems relatively clear in most areas, certainly clear enough for me to be able to do my job as a member of the licensing committee. Why other people find that difficult, I'm not sure. But anyway, we've made the decision. And that's the end of the meeting. So thank you everybody for joining today. Councillor Pashak?
I was just going to suggest maybe a training session on areas of and again, it's not always just in the city centre, and I think that's a point that Councillor Pullen raised, because there are other areas that aren't city centre, such as there could be a potential, say my area Hillsborough, or there could be a potential in Chapel Town. There could be an area in sort of Firth Park or Darnall and these sorts of areas. Yeah, I think it might, and it might be useful to have a training session on how an area becomes such an area, because there are times when we brush up against planning, and planning has its own rules and we have our own rules. So maybe it would work at some stage to have a training session on that, and then everybody on the committee is aware of that, and that might inform some other review of some other policy, and we could maybe take it into account then. So rather than just leave it there, if it is unclear for some people, then maybe we need to make it clearer. Thank you, Chair.
Very good point, Councillor Pashak. Do you think we could take
that dichotomy between the roles of the two committees, the two so-called quasi-legal committees, is something which I think wants addressing. I wasn't going to raise it now, I was going to raise it in private. But since you mention it, I think that's an extremely important point you make there. Thank you.
Right, I was asking John, could we go back and ask if that could be a point of training?
Yeah, that's something the licensing service can take. We do have regular training sessions, don't we, for the committee? So we can add that on, or arrange a special one for that purpose.
It's just disappointing sometimes that people are unable to attend some of those sessions, which will be very useful to them. But there's not much you can do about that. Is that we can only offer the training. If they're not able to attend, perhaps we could try and arrange another session if people had missed them.
Yeah.
Right. So if that is now everything, then I will say thank you to everyone, and I'll see some of you tomorrow. And for everyone else, we'll be back to normal again next week. Thank you. And bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you.